What made the Game Boy so successful was the games. All you have to do is look at a title like Tetris. Simple in its design, easy to pick up and play, but it didn't matter what your skill level was, you could progress and continue to enjoy the game no matter how long you had been playing it. So let's take a look at Mega Man. For those of you who are wondering if whether or not these games hold up, well, take a look at the Mega Man series. Not only is it extremely responsive and difficult, but the soundtrack is fantastic. The actual gameplay is really challenging, and it's not challenging in that the controls and the response of the game is laggy or it doesn't have, that kind of intuitive control scheme. The challenge is really in the level design and the characters. It's a great series that still holds up today, and I can only imagine at the time when it released, what people must have thought, like, wow, this is incredible. Let's take a look at Ninja Turtles: Fall of the Foot Clan. So what I love about Ninja Turtles is that at the time, this was really the Paw Patrol of our generation. This was something that, it was a cultural phenomenon, not just with the comic books, but the cartoons, the toys, and to finally be able to play a handheld console with the Ninja Turtles and being able to select your character, which one, who's your favorite. It was just a great experience, and it holds up well. I mean, the controls feel tight and responsive. It's an awesome game. If you're looking to try out one of the games from the Ninja Turtle series, the third one, Radical Rescue, is the one you want to go for. Solar Stryker. Now, what's really cool about this game is the fact that you could really just turn it on and start playing. It is a true-to-form, arcade, fun shooter. What's great about Solar Stryker is that really, I think for almost anyone picking up a Game Boy game, this would be the easiest to switch on and start playing and having a blast. With Solar Stryker, what Tetris is to puzzles, Solar Stryker is to arcade games. Pac-Man. I mean, what more can you say about Pac-Man? It's iconic, it's a remake, and this feels like the arcade game. This is awesome. Mortal Kombat. Talk about a letdown. Now, in the 90s, Mortal Kombat was awesome. The film, the game, I mean, the Mortal Kombat game on the SNES and the Sega, it changed a lot of things in the gaming industry. And when we heard that this was going to be available on the Game Boy and that we could find, I think everyone collectively held their breath to finally be able to have Mortal Kombat in the privacy of your own handheld. And then you turned it on, and it sucked. It was laggy. The controls felt just stuck. You thought your Game Boy was broken. And it just, graphically, it just didn't hold up very well. But I remember when I was playing as a kid, you kind of you're in denial. You lie to yourself like, no, this is as good. This is as good. Yoshi. Now, if you're not overly familiar with the Game Boy, this isn't like the modern iterations of Yoshi. This is actually more akin to a game like Tetris. It's like a puzzle game. If you're into this sort of thing, it's actually quite a bit of fun. And I think this was the first time you saw Yoshi on the Game Boy. So what Yoshi does well is the same as what Tetris did well. It's basic in its graphics, but the gameplay is highly addictive. Blades of Steel. To be able to play hockey like this from what really, felt like a at-home console, it was interesting. It was challenging because it doesn't necessarily hold up well, but it was cool. You could play just regular games, and you could even challenge people in fights. It was kind of weird. However, unless you grew up with the franchise, I don't know if you want to check it out. Wheel of Fortune. Maybe if you're a fan of the show, you'd like to have this, but some games look better on the shelf. F1. Now, this was a game that I think everybody had, and that was probably due to the fact that if you had a multi-link cable, yeah, it was a game that you could play with your friends and have multiplayer. I don't remember anyone ever playing it. I think it's kind of fun. To have a three-dimensional space to be driving through, not a top-down experience. I don't know. It was, I think at the time it might have been a graphical flex, but yeah, I don't know if it's held up all that well. It's okay. So for all the innovation and work that went into the 4-player experience with the Game Boy, there was really only 3 games that could utilize it. F1 Race, Wave Race, and Top Rank Tennis. If there was more, I don't think anyone cares. Donkey Kong. Now, if there are a few games that really stand out on the Game Boy, this is one of them. From the start of the title screen, just like the arcade, you're transported into probably one of the most addicting and fun gameplay experiences of any platformer. If you're thinking about getting a Game Boy or you're looking at games that you don't have, I highly recommend this one. Here's another classic, Paperboy. Now, on NES, this was probably the first time you felt like you were in an RPG or like a world, and you probably thought it was the greatest thing ever. But like a lot of games on the Game Boy, there were ports, and the experience is... So the objective's pretty straightforward. You're delivering papers, but on a smaller screen size and with the different gameplay experience, it isn't really quite as fun as what I remember on console. But don't worry, they made a second one. And the second one might be worse. Awesome. Double Dragon. One of the best games that was on the NES was Double Dragon, so when they announced that it was coming to the Game Boy, that was pretty exciting. The problem, like a lot of these classic NES titles that were ported over to the Game Boy, it just wasn't quite the same experience. But I think for most of us, you kind of just did the squint and like, yeah, it's good enough, because while it might not have been the same thing as playing it on console, it was still pretty cool that you could actually still have this in your pocket and play it wherever you wanted to. For portable beat-em-up games, Double Dragon, yeah, it does the trick. It's better than Mortal Kombat. Now, it's probably time to talk about one of the most important series on the Game Boy, and that's Super Mario Land. Now, the original game, this was really the first time you had that experience of playing a console game on a handheld. Now, it might not have been identical, albeit developed by a different team. The feel was still there, the responsiveness of a Mario game, the soundtrack for a Mario game, the characters. It really did feel like a quality experience on a handheld. And for me, I mean, this was a really special game that it made the Game Boy feel like it was something that you should have and you could play as a standalone, even if you didn't have a console. So, Super Mario Land was really a great achievement for the Game Boy. But if your expectations were satisfied with Super Mario Land, you had no idea what was coming with 6 golden coins. See, Super Mario Land, 6 golden coins, I mean, it didn't even feel like a direct continuation from Super Mario Land. It was an entirely different experience. The character designs were much more detailed. You had an entire world to explore with, I mean, just the soundtrack alone of this game. If you had to pick a game to take with you and it was the only game you'd have left, the Desert Island game, I mean, it might be the ultimate Game Boy game for me. There were secrets, there were boss fights, there were, I mean, just a host of characters and diverse level design that really, I can't imagine there being a more fun game to keep playing even to this day after sinking so many hours, days into this game. Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins is in so many ways a perfect game. But I really wish they did a DX version like Link's Awakening so that we could have it in color. You could even throw in a Luigi in there. So Super Mario Land 3 or Wario Land. So Wario Land, I think, was an interesting sequel in the franchise because the expectation was so high after Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins that a lot of people might have thought this was a letdown, but that would probably just be on the surface. If you look at what Wario Land does well, there's so much to offer here, and it's with an entirely new character that really it's its own story. And I think over time you start to fall in love with the different character designs, and you want to play this title even more because it has the same qualities of a Super Mario Land 2, but it's a new world, it's new characters to experience, different gameplay modes. I mean, just the ability to have that same quality, but in a new universe, probably ended up being the most played title in my collection. Another thing too to point out is that this is the debut of the character Wario. And you have to remember at the time, Nintendo was probably so skeptical and worried about launching this new character that they attributed the Super Mario Land title in this game, even though Mario's not even in it. But look how successful the franchise came to be, spawning 2 sequels after this on the handhelds, and it being one of the more known characters in the Nintendo universe. It's a special game. It's something unique to have, and really, you can see just how much care and attention to detail they put into this franchise, just in this game alone. Jurassic Park. Now, surprisingly, this game is actually a really good RPG. While you could really get into the story, the biggest problem that it had was the fact that there was no save states. So you'd be sitting down for a long time trying to beat this game. So while Jurassic Park was a great RPG for the Game Boy, without save states, it was brutal. You had to sit for so long to make any progress, and had I known then, what I know now is there's a cheat code that you can press start and select and pick the level that you want to jump to. So that's Jurassic Park, and they actually made it part 2. And Jurassic Park Part 2 is actually an entirely different game. Rather than it being a top-down view of the character, it's a side-scroller. And in my opinion, it's way more fun to play, and if you really want to, you can still enter a cheat code and jump levels. So while Jurassic Park 2 is actually not a top-down view of the character, it's a side-scroller, you could also enter a cheat code to jump levels, just like Contra, and it made the games a lot more playable considering that they just didn't have save states, and it'd be really frustrating if you didn't have the time to sit down and play through the whole game. So things I wish I would have known then, but you know, we only have Google now, so yeah. Speedy Gonzales. Now, I think what's great about this game is that it gave an alternative to playing Sonic the Hedgehog. So the fact that you could have a side-scroller running type game that, you know, instead of jumping on enemies, you're trying to avoid them and try and get through the level as fast as you can. Another thing too, the sound effects for this game were utilized in a lot of other Game Boy games. You might even hear it throughout, you know, as you're playing different games. Like, I think that sound was from Speedy Gonzales. Gargoyle's Quest. So what's interesting about Gargoyle's Quest is that, you know, while I didn't have it growing up, it is a good game. But the way it was marketed was, you know, that it had graphics so real you'll forget it's a game. And I mean, let's be real here. This is on the Game Boy. I mean, it's not that realistic. So if you know Bomberman, you know Bomberman. And Bomberman GB was a really cool game. I mean, his little character's got the Indiana Jones hat. Of the Bomberman games that were available on the Game Boy, this one was really great. It had clean graphics, good level design. Just a great game to have. So while Bomberman GB was a classic Bomberman game, there was a follow-up that a lot of you might not know called Pocket Bomberman. And unlike the traditional sense, this was a really responsive and fun side-scrolling game that still used the same characters but had really different gameplay, and it's just kind of a hidden gem that you might want to check out if you haven't. Metroid 2, Return of Samus. If you know Nintendo, you know that they love Metroid, and if you love Nintendo, chances are you love Metroid. And this was a really heavily marketed franchise that, you know, to this day, Samus is included in a ton of Nintendo games, and to have it on a handheld console was pretty cool. It was really an interesting character, and what, I mean, some of you might know, might not know, is that the character Samus is actually female. Kirby's Dreamland. Now, this game was probably the biggest standout of what didn't feel like a console port onto a handheld, but more of a polished and fun experience. This is probably the game that I put in the most time playing because the soundtrack was fantastic, the character designs were great, and really the gameplay was a lot of fun. This was probably the game that if I had to pick something that I wanted to pick up and play right away, it'd be Kirby's Dreamland, because it still plays so well. So if there's any drawback to Kirby's Dreamland is that it was short. It was a great game and you didn't want to put it down, but you could finish it relatively quickly, and it wasn't until later, until I grew out of gaming, that I came back to it and realized that they made a Kirby's Dreamland 2. So Kirby's Dreamland 2 was not only the same as Kirby's Dreamland in all the right ways, but it just improved on the formula by adding save states, power-ups, new characters. It was a great continuation of the series, and you know, like a lot of people, I didn't even know that they made a Kirby's Dreamland 2, and this game is fantastic. So if you're a fan of Kirby's Dreamland, there's a game you probably didn't hear about. And that's Trip World. Arguably one of the greatest hidden gems on the Game Boy. Trip World is not only a terrific game, but it's just chocked full of amazing soundtracks, characters, and the gameplay is just so much fun. And because it's such a rare game, I don't know if my copies are legitimate, but I'm just happy that I'm able to play this because I didn't even know this existed up until recently, and it's a really good game. In fact, this is something that, like Kirby's, I think should be in your collection of Game Boy games. So if you're a Nintendo fan, the name Contra is synonymous with the brand. It is one of those standout franchises that really, when you think about it coming to the Game Boy, you kind of have to hold your breath. Did they succeed in pulling off a true Contra game on a handheld? And they did. Playing this game now, it still feels like a Contra game. What's great about Contra is that it's a good example of how you don't have to compromise playing a Game Boy version of a game. It can be its own thing, but still have those qualities of what made the console version so popular. Batman. I think what's great about Batman is that when you think about games that are based on movies, or any time they take an iconic character and put it in video game form, they tend to disappoint. But on Game Boy, Batman was responsive and fun. It was what you'd come to expect from a Game Boy game. I think a lot of games like this, we've come to expect that they're just money grabs, but this one isn't the case. It's actually a rare exception that I think got overlooked because, well, similar to the SNES version of Batman, you know, it just felt kind of like a letdown. But this is a game that, you know, if you really enjoyed Super Mario Land, you'd really like this game. Dr. Mario. Now, similar to Tetris, Dr. Mario is actually a very faithful port to the NES. And it's just a really great game to have when, you know, your budget's limited and you can't have a lot of games. This is probably one of the ones that was in your collection. It was just a really fun game, easy to play, easy to pick up, and, you know, progressive in terms of its difficulty. You could really, whether you're a beginner or you've played it a lot, you know, it's still fun. Battletoads. Now, if there's one thing I remember about Battletoads, is that it's relentlessly difficult. If you remember, just playing through the first level, if you could make it to the bike, and you could get past the stages, how fast everything came by on screen, I can't remember how many times I just got stuck and basically ripped the game out of the Game Boy, because it's a really good beat 'em up game, and it's unapologetic in terms of, you know, how good it thinks you are as a gamer. It's a fun game. It's Battletoads, I think, is, you know, what you would expect if you wanted to get Ninja Turtles, or if you wanted to get a fun side-scroller beat 'em up that really, it was just kind of unexpected. The artwork was really cool. It was just kind of this original IP that it was a welcome surprise. If you got it and played it for the first time, you were kind of just blown away at just how much fun this game really is. The Battletoads franchise was really kind of in a league of its own, and not so much because of the character design and the gameplay, but just some of the material and some of the story elements were kind of raunchy, and there was a lot of innuendo that you wouldn't expect to see, you know, in a kid's game, or, you know, let alone on Nintendo. So looking at another awesome franchise, Castlevania. Now, Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge is probably the standout title for me, because not only did they improve on the gameplay from Castlevania Adventure, but Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge has probably my favorite soundtrack in the Game Boy library, and it's an awesome game. When you're playing through this, the only thing that I would say is the downside is that, again, there's no save states. Like a lot of these games, it's just brutal if you have to get sent back to the start. And thankfully, now, thanks to the internet, we have cheat codes that you can look up, and it makes the game more playable. And, you know, it's one of the things you'll notice playing these older games is that they're incredibly difficult, you know, juxtaposed to newer games now where you have respawns, and it's just, it's better at keeping you engaged in the game. These are, they'll punish you if you're not on your toes. And anyways, that's what made them so much fun, is that you had great gameplay, a great soundtrack, and even if you got sent back to the beginning, it's worth it to go through again. Zelda, Link's Awakening. Now, if I have to explain to you why this game is what it is, you're probably watching the wrong video. But something that you might not know is that this game was a side project. And what it ended up turning out to be was maybe the best game in the entire franchise. And you can see that in the re-release that came out on the Switch. A lot of people refer to this game as their favorite Zelda game, and I think it was just unexpected at the time. It was something that, from its opening title sequence, the music, the cinematic, it just felt like something very special and unique. And you could arguably say it inspired the creation of a lot of other games, because you had RPG elements, you had action elements, and it had kind of everything that you hoped you'd find in a Game Boy game, or a Nintendo game for that matter. Great soundtrack, great gameplay, awesome level design, and an interesting story and characters. Unlike some of the other standout titles on the Game Boy, this one got a colorized version later on the Game Boy Color. It's just one of the overall great franchises Nintendo has to offer. If you're familiar at all with Nintendo, you've heard of Zelda. So another game that you might not know about, but is an absolute unsung hero for the Game Boy, is Mania. Now, this game was created by Shigeru Miyamoto, and it arguably is one of the best games on the platform. So if you're a huge fan of, say, like Donkey Kong, Link's Awakening, sometimes you want to go back through the creator's library to see other work that they did, and this game is a perfect example of something that you might stumble across that really embodies all the great characteristics of what made his game so special, and it's just a lot of fun to play, and you know, it's fun to discover something new and that you just accidentally overlooked because you didn't know. Well, Mania is 100% worth checking out if you don't own it already. So I think when you look at the whole point of the handheld video game market, you know, as gamers, a lot of the time we're just killing time, and when it comes down to the best game for anyone to pick up and try or become the master of, well, what more can you say? Tetris is the best example of something that's accessible, it's fun to play, it's addictive, it's something that appealed to everyone, and not just kids. This was something that, you know, was marketed towards adults as well. It was a challenging game. It was something that everyone could play, and people could challenge each other. This was, I mean, I have a lot of good memories of setting up a link cable and playing against friends with a Game Boy that, you know, Tetris was something that even if you didn't game, you could pick up and jump in and have fun. It's something that is, you know, been covered by a lot of people in terms of a historic landmark in gaming culture, and probably one of the best moves Nintendo could have made when launching the Game Boy with a pack-in title. Putting in Super Mario Land would have been great for kids, but putting in Tetris would have been great for everyone, and that's, you know, why they did it in North America and it became such a cultural phenomenon. Tetris really represents what is so great about the Game Boy. It's something that anyone could pick up and not know anything about how to play it or what to do, but they're immediately hooked and they just don't want to give it back. If you thought this video was helpful, please like and subscribe, show your support, and keep a lookout for the other episodes in this special series. Thanks for watching. So I just want to take a quick moment to thank the actual customer who owns these products. Typically in Why Buy reviews, it's always the customer who owns a product talking about it on screen. But in this special series, there was just such a great collection that we had an opportunity to cover that we didn't want to pass on the opportunity. So working with the customer who owns these products, kind of coaching me and explaining their story and having me sort of retell it was really special. And it, you know, not only helped me relive my nostalgia and love for Nintendo and handheld video games, but I really do think that it was a special treat to be able to cover just such a wide range of this collection and deliver something that is not only educational, but just a lot of fun. So thanks for watching, and thank you to everyone who is involved in this and made it possible.